Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. Happy Monday, all you minties. Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And you all voted for it, and here it finally is. The reprint of Avengers by Busiek and Pérez Omnibus Volume 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at it together. Before going any further, a big thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on September 10th or 11th, depending on where you get your books. And what we're looking at here is one of the direct market covers. This is the one that's supplied by George Pérez. On the left-hand side is your other direct market cover. That is the one that's supplied by Alan Davis. And there is a difference in the spines. And on the right-hand side is your standard edition cover. That's the one that's going to be available everywhere. And again, a difference in the spines. So that is something to keep in mind. Everything underneath the dust jacket is the same, though. So let's bring it back to this. So here we have Earth's Mightiest Heroes, The Avengers by Kurt Busiek and George Pérez. And then let's look at the spine of the book, which we saw a little bit earlier. Marvel Omnibus and The Avengers. Don't worry, your copy is going to be completely fine. This just came from the printer that way. By Kurt Busiek and George Pérez, and Volume 2. And then the back of the book, which is identical to the way that it looked originally. The book retails for $125, but so did the original printing, which is what I'm going to be comparing it to externally first, and then a little bit later internally. But we saw that cover. This is the exact same actual design for everything in the book. Kurt Busiek, and yeah, for the standard edition, Kurt Busiek, George Pérez, and down there, Volume 2, and the back of the book, as I said, looks identical. ISBN, looking a little bit smaller than the original printing over here. The old order changeth like never before as Busiek and Pérez complete their glory-restoring tenure. And yes, it is. Now, I'm sorry, I gave it away already, just like I'll be giving this one away. The second printing of Volume 1, it had a red spine for the direct market cover. I think one of them, the one with the Alan Davis covers, has the red spine, but it's not full red. It actually has, here, let's pull it up, actually. It actually has Wasp there. So it's like she's flying out of the red. I don't know. I know people sometimes now are getting books based on the spine, some on covers, some just don't care. So I did want to be as thorough as possible on my overviews. All right, underneath the dust jacket, let's look at these flaps first of all. Putting the mighty back in the Avengers and the creators over here on the right-hand side. So yes, a little bit about what the stories are in here, but you have Kurt Busiek, George Pérez, Roger Stern, Mark Bagley, Alan Davis, Kieran Dwyer, Manuel Garcia, Jerry Ordway, and also featuring the work of all these wonderful folks, which we'll talk a little bit about. But it is the exact same image as before of Count Nefaria just kicking the crud out of the Avengers by Kurt Busiek. And that is an image that you'll see inside with the crossover with the Thunderbolts. Okay, we are going to crack this book open and look at this beautiful artwork, talk about some of the stories found in here, and look at the extras and compare it to the original printing. All right, so I mentioned a little bit that this looks identical to this one here, but I did forget to note that this is actually textless, whereas this has the logo, the original printing from 2015. So let's go ahead and start opening this book up. We have some blue end sheets. Zoom out a little bit here. And that's very similar to the way that it looked before. This is very similar. And then your title page, and of course, your table of contents. Now, this doesn't look as blue as the original printing, and I'll be doing a comparison here in a little bit. But we do kick it off with Avengers number 24. So this collects Avengers 24 through 56, the 1.5 issue Avengers Annuals 2000 and 2001, Thunderbolts 42 and 44, Maximum Security Dangerous Planet one-shot, Maximum Security 3-issue miniseries, and then the Avengers Ultron Imperative. The book has 1,248 pages, and again, retails for $125. I did want to go back here to give credit where credit is due, because Kurt Busiek does write a lot of this in here, but you also have Fabian Nicieza, Steve Englehart, Roger Stern, and Roy Thomas, and then your pencils here by George Perez, who does about a third of the book. Stuart Eminem, Norm Brayfogle, like classic artists like that. Jerry Ordway, John Romita Jr., Steve Epton. Alan Davis does come in and do like the last part of the book, as well as Kieran Dwyer. And that's just to name a few of the artists in here. But you see names like Ivan Reyes. Over here are your inkers and Dick Giordano, Al Vey, Wade Von Grawbadger, Scott Hanna, Norm Brayfogle, just to name a few. Colors like Tom Smith and Joe Rosas, one of my favorite colorists of all time. And then the lettering by the master himself, Richard Starking, and Comic Craft, and other people like Oscar Gongora. Now, just in case you haven't read Volume 1, I do have to talk about this little era of Marvel Comics called Heroes Reborn and Heroes Return. Okay, so just minor spoilers if you don't know what that is. Okay, Heroes Reborn was when Marvel decided, well, our books aren't selling. Let's go ahead and let the Image guys do these books for a year. So we'll just use the event of Onslaught as a reason for these people, these Avengers, to go into another world. And they were. Like, you had the characters like Thor and Iron Man and part of the Hulk. I said part, but that's a whole nother story. And you had the Fantastic Four being written and drawn by people like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, Jeff Loeb, actually, with Captain America later on. But it was for a year. When they came back, the era was known as Heroes Return, and that's what kicks off Avengers issue number 1. So in actuality, you had over 500 issues of Avengers. Onslaught happens. The universe doesn't really get rebooted, it just loses the Avengers. Earth knows that we've lost Earth's mightiest heroes. So what ends up happening is that they get reimagined by the Image creators, and that is known as Avengers Volume 2. Only lasts for 13 issues. I know. Only 12 issues have been collected. Issue 13 is a legal nightmare, I'm sure. And then they get to come back, and that's Heroes Reborn. So this is really known as Volume 3 of Avengers, if you keep up with things like that. And if you don't, well, just know that eventually it will get renumbered by the time you get to the Bendis era. So you'll have like issue 500. So after the events of Ultron, which is such an amazing story, and the story that kicked off with all the Avengers having now Avengers cards to see who is going to be an Avenger, we have George Perez giving us the tail end of his run. Now, Kurt Busiek stays on the book. So we have these group of characters known as the, what are they called? The Exemplars, who had first shown up in the 8th Day crossover between Spider-Man and Thor that featured the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut's power came from the Cyttorak, and they have very similar powers, and he broke some rules, so they want to execute him. And the Avengers are like, wait, he came and asked for help. What do we do? Well, we gotta go and kick the crap out of these Exemplars is what we gotta do, because it's not right to execute people. So they get involved, and then they get put on trial, and the Exemplars want to make an example out of them and execute them, but it doesn't work out the way that they thought it was going to work out. Now, what ends up happening is that Captain America, now that was a question mark on purpose, creates another team of Avengers that is full of Carol Danvers, at this time known as Warbird, and this is the character of Scott Lang, and then you have this character that showed up in the first volume, Silverclaw, and you have the new Captain Marvel, Janice Vell, show up through here. And together they're going to form a new team of Avengers. And the first order of business is to go and infiltrate this one cult that is kind of been a big part of the Avengers during Kurt Busiek's run. And the Triune, that's what they're called. The Triune, who's like a cult that gets explored a little bit later on. And they have this guy named Triathlon that's with them. And eventually he kind of will help out the Avengers. And this is Dwayne Freeman, who's kind of like their Henry Gyrich, like kind of being the government liaison to the Avengers. So what happens when George Perez is about to leave, the Avengers go through a shakeup, because that's just the Avengers. Some of the members end up leaving for personal reasons. Some of them end up joining. And this is a really interesting reason why. It kind of reminds me of when Henry Gyrich, of all people, did that in the Avengers when he forced the Avengers to take in Falcon because they didn't have a minority on the team. And it was the government doing that. So it feels like the government is doing that again, and that's where we get Triathlon. So Dwayne Freeman's like, look, you don't have any minorities on the team. They're like, yo, we got mutants. And he was like, yeah, but people are like, don't like mutants. So it becomes kind of this big topical thing. Like, there's a big face down here between Freeman and Iron Man that, yeah, got really heavy and in your face with like a big social commentary. So at this moment, these are your new Avengers. Even Captain America walked away for a little bit, but you have Warbird, that's what she's known as at this time, Scarlet Witch, Wasp, Goliath, Triathlon, Iron Man, and She-Hulk. I love the way that She-Hulk just joins the team. She ends up just getting a phone call from Janet, and she was like, hey, I need you. And She-Hulk's like, cool, I'm there. And then this particular story with the return of Cool Goth. I love that guy. The Avengers get to travel through time, get to help out a group of people. Silverclaw gets reunited with a family member through here, and eventually will become a reserve member of the Avengers, and will play heavily, especially in that last story arc. Now, this is one of the most interesting stories in here, because Patsy Walker is a character not a lot of people talk about. She's a very interesting character, and I think she's gotten a lot more spotlight now that we've had reprints. But back when I was like collecting comics when I was younger, all I knew of her was because of like Steve Englehart's run. I didn't know anything about Patsy Walker having a comic beforehand or having a couple of comics before that. It wasn't until later with collected editions, and then thank goodness the age of the internet, Captain. Who says that? But, you know, there were a lot of forums that you could join, and people were so knowledgeable, just teaching you things that I didn't hear about, because I didn't know anybody at the comic book store that knew about Patsy Walker. But it's interesting because it starts off as this really hokey storyline with a flashback of Patsy Walker, who will eventually become Hellcat, and it goes into some dark territories. Norm Brayfogle doing these wonderful pieces right here that I didn't expect the annual to go. It's a very dramatic annual, and what ends up happening with the character, and how she ends up, how the end of it kind of leads into a little mini-series, and there is a collection with her stories out there. It's a trade paperback. This is the crossover with the Thunderbolts. Now, if you haven't been keeping up with the Thunderbolts, the team roster, just like the Avengers, has changed. Mark Bagley supplying the artwork here. And this is the return of Count Nefaria. But he's like a super-powered Count Nefaria. You have Madame Mask also coming back here, but playing a bigger role with the Thunderbolts. And I do love the fact, I love the design of this guy right here. I don't want to spoil who that is. I do love the fact that Hawkeye is now leading the Thunderbolts during this time, because it seems like, you know, he went from being a bad guy to joining the Avengers, and who else to lead the Thunderbolts when something happens to their team leader than somebody that got a redemption arc with the Avengers. And can I just say, George Perez, man, knocking it out of the park each and every time. He has this classic, I mean, he is a classic artist, or was a classic artist, and just, even towards the end of his run, does not take it easy. Like, just panel after panel, Avenger after Avenger. Oh, he's so good. And speaking of classic artists, this is somebody that I really enjoyed, and I thought was a lot older when I was younger than he really is. And this is Jerry Ordway. Jerry Ordway is doing the Maximum Planet storylines. And I remember finding his stories in Superman, and I thought, oh man, this is a guy from like the 50s. He's got this classic art style. Nope. That's just the way that he draws, and he's excellent. So Maximum Security was the return of Marvel comic events. We haven't had one in a while. I remember when I said Onslaught was like the big one, and then it seems like when I left comics, like they didn't have any for the years like 97, 98. It wasn't until this Marvel event started that they brought it back, and the only things collected in here are the Avengers issues that tie heavily into this. The story is simple. You have Avengers, what are they called? The Avengers Infinity, I think. It's a group of cosmic Avengers, I say that, but it's Thor, Tigress, Quasar, who else is in there? Moondragon, Photon, that's what Monica Rambeau is known as at the time, Jack of Hearts, and Star Fox. And the reason they're needed is because the powers that be have decided that they want to wipe away the galaxy, and they want to wipe away this area of the galaxy, which, hey, we happen to live here, Earth, and we're populating this planet, so what are we going to do? So what what the council decides to do is make Earth a giant prison for aliens. And that's when the characters get split up. You have the Avengers Infinity, you have the Avengers on Earth, but it's a big crossover. So you have like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four that get involved. But those issues are not collected in here. This, I believe, is the Avengers Maximum Security tie-in issue with those Avengers Infinity characters I was talking about earlier. And yes, Ronan the Accuser kind of plays like the role of the Warden through here. This is that church I was talking about, or the cult rather, revealing some of their secrets. And then we have, this is Steve Epting doing that issue. Who's no stranger to the Avengers, but also no stranger to the Avengers is Alan Davis coming in with his first issue right here. And this particular issue leads into the big story arc that will be collected pretty soon, actually. And that's foreshadowing these two characters right here. And it is my all-time favorite Avengers storyline with my favorite villain. So before that, though, we do have this Hulk. Someone is out there and making people turn into Hulk, just normal people, and they are duking it out. Again, drawn by the phenomenal Alan Davis. And then we kick it off with this 16-part storyline. And this is what I meant when I was talking about this. By the way, during this time, Marvel was also doing the legacy numbers as well as the new numbers. So to not confuse, yet confuse people further. So the next storyline, the 16-issue event, to me is like a big event for them, is the story called the Kang Dynasty. I've seen it called the Kang War, I think, when it's collected. And let me tell you, as a guy that got into collected editions back in 2002, by 2003, when I was trying to get all the Avengers, I could not find a copy of the trade paperback, like with the Ariel Olivetti cover. Oh my gosh, it was impossible. And I remember one time in 2004 almost placing a bid on eBay for $157, I can tell you right now, $157 for that trade paperback because it was out of print and I needed it to wrap up the story. I didn't know how Avengers by Busiek and Perez was going to end. And thank goodness we live in the golden era of the collected editions. All right, so back to this storyline. What kicks off the Kang Dynasty is, of course, Kang. He's sitting on this, inside of this giant spaceship called the Damocles, who's like shaped like a giant sword, hovering above Earth. The Scarlet Centurion comes down here and, he starts picking a fight with the Avengers. And it seems like this isn't something that Kang wanted. What Kang is really doing is trying to help out humanity. He's trying to help them because he sees things that are to come. And in order to prove this, he ends up blowing up the UN. And this is such a weird way to prove it. And the Avengers are like, oh my gosh, all those people in there are dead. And Kang's like, nah, fool, I saved them. Look, I'm being serious. The world is going to be doomed. Destruction is coming, and I'm your only savior. So it's that type of Kang. Right? But there's always something going on with him that isn't just in front of your face. This is a guy that isn't playing chess. He's playing 8 games of chess with himself sometimes. And if you know anything about his character, you know what I'm talking about. So the Avengers are kind of scattered out as Kang is here explaining to members of the UN and some of the Avengers how the world is going to end, what exactly is going to happen, and how it leads into the destruction of humanity. And the UN still decides to turn him away. They're like, no, we don't need your help. We don't need a savior. We've got a savior. So Kang's like, all right, you're going to see. So then everything comes and attacks the Avengers from all sides. Like, you saw a little bit of the presence right here that takes place in Russia. You see that Atuma's Atlanteans are attacking, so the presence is back, and he's attacking with these zombified, glowing skeletons here. Atuma is back. And then you have the Deviants. So some of the characters are dealing with the Deviants. And Deviants, of course, actually, after Onslaught, they kind of woke up. So we hadn't seen Deviants for a while in the Marvel Universe. So I love that about Kurt Busiek. Like, he's such a historian and really writes as a huge fan of these stories that have been written in the past, but modernizing some of them. This is one of my favorite things that was done, and I always joke about how I actually like the crossing. It's not a joke. I actually did enjoy the crossing, which is just crazy because I get it. People hate it. But there's this little story here from Jarvis that talks about the era of the crossing that really isn't mentioned, even in Avengers Forever. So I love the fact that they're tying it all in with even Avengers the Crossing. So the Kang storyline is all about Kang coming in at first like, hey, I'm going to help, and then saying, you know what, here's the way I'm going to help the world. I'm going to make everyone my slave, and I'm going to take over against your will. Now, in between the stories, some of the Avengers are caught up in this other storyline that is right in here, and that is the Ultron Imperative, with, again, other people helping out. Kurt Busiek, and you have Jean-Paul Leon, Paul Smith, Tom Grumet, John McCrae, and Jim Starlin, Pat O'Leary, Jorge Lucas. Sorry, George. He was busy. I think this is during the time when episodes 1, 2, and 3 were coming out, right? Yeah, he was busy doing that stuff. Didn't have any time for the Avengers. Anyway, back to this. So it's a little bit of, I don't even want to say a breather or a filler. It kind of fits in perfectly. And then there's extras that they keep in the back. And speaking of extras, sometimes you're going to see thumbnail sketches or thumbnail size covers. Those are some of the extras that are collected on the opposite side of the standard edition cover. So eventually, Kang, this is the cover to the trade paperback I was looking for. I'm not kidding, $157 for a trade. Well, I came close. I didn't do it, and I'm so glad I waited. Because then eventually I ended up getting like the oversized hardcovers. And then we got Omnis, and here we are, the home of collected editions. So yes, the Avengers team up. There's a bit of a time jump that happens through here. There are stories that he connects even back to Avengers 200, which is just crazy. And I love the design of Damocles. Like, that thing. You know, there's a cover that has him, like, stabbing Earth with the ship. What the hell does that mean? So why does this go on for 16 issues? Well, all I'm going to say is, Kang wins. That's all I'm going to say. You can find out what the hell that means when I said Kang wins. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit here and go to the Aftermath storyline by Patrick Searcher doing the artwork there. And then the last storyline, which I think is kind of divisive with fans, like people that love his run. They were confused as to why he wanted to spend time doing this particular issue. And it almost feels like he is taking inventory, or through the eyes of the Avengers, they're taking inventory of everything that's happened. And I'll leave it at that. So it does end. And then we get, also collected in here, the Avengers. This is the Bruce Timm issue. Yeah, this one right here, the 1/2. So it takes place in between Avengers 1 and Avengers 2. And written again. Well, actually, this one's written by Stern, yeah. Filling in for Stan Lee. And drawn by Bruce Timm of Batman, the animated series, and of course, a lot of other things, fame. And they actually have some of the letter pages. There we go. And then the script to issue 49, which was the Nuff Said issue. I didn't even talk about the brilliance of that. You have the trading cards. And remember, some of the extras are in between issues. But before we look at, yes, this issue. This is the Nuff Said issue. It's him stabbing Earth. But no dialogue at all. And it's weird to say that when I'm talking about somebody like Kurt Busiek. Especially if even at the beginning, I could see people getting overwhelmed by the amount of word bubbles and just the dialogue. But it's interesting dialogue. It's good dialogue. It's not like he's just getting paid by the word. It actually makes sense when you're reading the story. So don't be turned away because of those long speeches sometimes, or even just information overload that he does sometimes. I happen to love it. Okay, what was I going to do next? Oh yes, the book has 1,248 pages, and this is sewn binding, printed at the Donley printer. Let's actually go back towards the beginning so you can see the way it lays over when we have spread pages. Absolutely beautiful, no gutter loss at all. And as far as the paper stock, it's not as thick as the first printing, the original printing. Got a feeling it to get here. I'll get it in the shot. feeling them at the same time. It's not as thick as it, but it's not thin either. Like the one printed in 2015, oh my gosh, almost 10 years ago, isn't thick to begin with. And also printed at the Donnelly printer, by the way. And let's actually look here. It's got the same kind of bleed through. I don't even know why I need to do a proper comparison, but I am. So the way this one's laying over, and then the way this one's laying over. The new printing over here on the right-hand side. Colors, the only color difference I've seen so far is this. Like, this actually feels more like a sky blue. This is more like a navy blue. But as far as the colors internally, maybe it's a little more vibrant over here in the new printing. The original printing actually looking a little more pink to the flesh tones. Yeah, you can tell like a little more pink than over here. It's a little darker over here, a little more vibrant. Not much of a difference. I actually like the way this one's laying over. Yeah, less gutter loss than over here. Not that this one had bad gutter loss or anything. But that is it. My favorite Avengers run. I did want to say just a couple more things. With beautiful artwork by Busiek Pérez. And really going back to the classic days. Like, Kurt Busiek is one of these writers that respects and loves comic book history. I mean, for goodness sakes, this is the guy that was a fan of comics and wrote in the idea of how to bring Jean Grey back from the dead before he even got paid by Marvel Comics. And the idea floated around the editorials. Like, it's just so interesting to see how he came up and became a comic book writer. And here he is with the greatest run on Avengers, according to me, the Uncanny Omar. I absolutely love it. I grew up with Uncle Raj, and then of course the Bob Harras era, and I came back to comics. And when I came back to comics, these were available in trade paperbacks. They were coming out with trade paperbacks. Oh, they weren't numbered that well, but that's, thank goodness for books like this now that are properly numbered. But everything is in here, including the crossover and the final issues of Busiek Pérez. But I wanted to come back and leave you with this piece right here. Because nobody did it like George. Nobody did it like him. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors. BD Cosmos, the Canadian leader in graphic novels. They have a physical storefront in Montreal, Quebec, and their website, bdcosmos.com, offers 25% off your order of over $99 or more, and free shipping everywhere in Canada for every order of $200 or more.
Their shipping care is exceptional. Your books will stay cozy through the rough Canadian weather and arrive to you in near mint condition.
After checkout, let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way, and you'll be added to the monthly $25 gift card raffle. Entries are valid for new and returning customers.
Don't be afraid to call or email them. Ask them questions. Their staff is always happy to help guide you towards the right purchase. Visit their website, bdcosmos.com, for more. BD Cosmos, with rewards and raffles taking care of customers in Canada. Eh?
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if you plan on picking it up, if you have the original printing, if you've never read it and you're going into this particular omnibus completely blind. And if you have any questions, leave those questions down below. If you did get it, which cover you went for. And that's it, everybody. Stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.